question, which will shock many in your audience, I'm sure. Um, is there a virus? Is there a virus called COVID-19? When you talk and listen to virologists and specialists and doctors who are not allowed into the mainstream media, doctors around the world in Germany and America and Austria, they are asking that question big time because they have not identified COVID-19. And so what's going on, I can elaborate on and how this all plays out and why people appear to be dying from it. But if people go to my website when they've watched this, davidicke.com, they'll find a video by a New York medical doctor, New York State medical doctor, now works in psychiatry, called Andrew Kaufman. And it's a absolutely brilliant breakdown of a crucial area of this story. He describes how when people started to fall ill in China, in Wuhan, they had about 200, I think it was up at 198 to start with. And they investigated 7 of them. And they did this by taking lung fluid. And they decided, with no evidence whatsoever, that the cause of their illness was a virus, which has been given the name COVID-19. But they never identified a virus from the lung fluid. They identified genetic material, which they coded. And they called it COVID-19, a virus. That genetic material is produced by a string of other possible causes, including lung cancer. So what they started doing, and this is what's happening to a large extent around the world still to this day, is they started to diagnose COVID-19, which they'd never identified and isolated, through symptoms. And you will notice that they are describing, what are the symptoms of COVID-19? Oh, they're flu-like symptoms. Yeah. The symptoms are the same as, again, a long list of other causes, including influenza, cold, etc., etc. But suddenly, instead of diagnosing them in their spectrum of possibility, anyone with those symptoms now had COVID-19, and it went down, they got COVID-19. So loads of people who had respiratory and other symptoms that would relate to flu-like symptoms, especially this year, in this time of the year, was now COVID-19. So the numbers started to fly, purely on redesignating all those symptoms from many possible causes as COVID-19, which they've never identified. The Chinese then, before they had any proof that it was a virus, or whatever it was causing those people to fall ill, they developed a test for it called a PCR test. Actually, it's an RT-PCR test. And this is what is being used to test people in America and all around the world now. And it is not testing for COVID-19. How can it? They've not identified it and isolated it. What it's testing for is this sequence of genetic material found in the lungs of these patients in China that has a long list of other possible causes, including lung cancer. And what Kaufman, and then of course what happens is that people are tested, they test positive for not the virus, but for this genetic material, and then now COVID-19. So you can see the numbers getting greater and greater and greater. And Kaufman then goes on to point out that when cells are toxic, when they are poisoned, what happens is they release, as part of the immune cleansing system, they release something called exosomes. This is all part of the natural body response system to toxicity in the cells. And without that, we'd be in real trouble. And these exosomes are also found in lung fluid, where this whole thing was supposed to come out of. What he then does is show you a picture of an exosome, and he shows you a picture of alleged COVID-19, and they are the same. COVID-19, what they're showing you on a slide, is actually exosomes, part of the body's natural detoxification system, which also comes into that genetic material. And so whenever you have toxic cells, which can be caused by disease, they can be caused by stress and fear, be caused by toxins, they can be caused by electromagnetic fields, brackets 5G. When the cells become toxic, they release these exosomes as part of the response process. And then when you look at the list of characteristics of exosomes and so-called COVID-19, including the same very receptors on the cells that they lock into, they're exactly the same. And so what's happened is they have taken the toxic response system of the body, exosomes, and they've renamed it COVID-19. So when they do the test, it's not for COVID-19, it's for the genetic material, and in that genetic material, you'll find exosomes. And therefore, we have a pandemic, it is claimed, by renaming a natural cellular response system COVID-19 that has destroyed the global economy on purpose. Been predicting it for ages in my books, and has created dependency on the state and authorities for billions of people. They have changed the world in a way it will never return to how it was before. And while people are locked away and their businesses are closed and the people that work for them are unemployed, the cult, which I've been exposing for 30 years, that's behind all this, that has no borders, it's a global web, has, through its multi-billionaires and its mega corporations, been buying up, and will continue to do so, businesses and resources, etc., on an absolute mega scale. And at the end of this process, this 1% will be fantastically more wealthy and have fantastically more control than they had before. About a week ago, there's an ultra-Zionist billionaire called Ackman in America. He made $2 billion betting on the catastrophe and what would happen as a result. This has allowed the very people, the very cult, the very networks that I have been exposing for 30 years to get the very control I've said for 30 years they're aiming to get. So, what is happening as it came out of China, and by the way, well, I'll come back to China in a minute. Let me say one other thing. As it came into the West, what was happening is that people in the medical profession were being told these are the symptoms of COVID-19. And still today, vastly, they are diagnosing COVID-19 from symptoms. So if you've got the flu, you have flu-like symptoms. If you've got a cold, you've got cold flu-like symptoms. But now you're COVID-19. And so the numbers grow and grow. Oh, more cases, more cases, more cases. I'll have a question for your viewers if they're sitting there thinking, oh, this can't be true. They wouldn't lie to us that much. Oh, they would. How come with all these people dying, it is said, from COVID-19, that the death numbers in Britain and Europe from all causes have not risen? Not risen in any way, shape or form to explain and to encompass the numbers of people dying from COVID-19. You know why? Because they're not. What's happening is they're being redesignated to have died from COVID-19. We have nurses and loved ones who are reporting over and over that what's happening is people are going into hospital with other things and they're being tested for COVID-19. No, they're not. They're being tested for this genetic material. And if, for instance, they have lung cancer, this will test positive for that genetic material and they'll be told they've got COVID-19. And what's happening is when they die from other causes, the death certificate is now saying they've died from COVID-19. 99%, this is official Italian government figures, 99% of people in Italy who have died from COVID-19 have had 1, 2, 3 or more other health problems. This they were in hospital for. And this is why journalists, proper journalists, members of the public in other words, have been going around hospitals in America and in Britain. Some guy's just been jailed in Britain for it. And they've been filming these war zone hospitals that you see in the media claimed, and they're empty. So why are they empty? They're empty because as a result of this virus hysteria, they have shut down all other operations. How many people are going to die as a result of that? They've shut down other consultations for people who are ill. How many are going to die because of that? And at the same time, that void of work has not been filled with COVID-19 patients because there is no COVID-19. And so because they're claiming this is a deadly virus, and they can't produce the numbers of dead people to support that, they're simply redesignating people who die of other things to have died of COVID-19. I'll give you a quick example. 2 days ago, we had he was very famous at one time, but he was, out of the business for quite a time. He was a comedian, a guy called Eddie Large. A lot of older people in Britain will know him. He went into hospital with heart failure. He's had a very bad heart for a while, apparently. He went into hospital with heart failure. And they tested him for COVID-19, this genetic material, not COVID-19, and they found that he tested positive. Because they're doing this with everyone who goes in hospital now. No matter what they do, fall down the stairs, you get COVID-19 tests when you get in hospital. And then he died. And they said that he basically died after contracting COVID-19. his very damaged heart that he went in a hospital for, of course, played no part in the fact that he died. And there's a very, I don't know whether you got this in America, but in Britain and other ones that I've looked at, there you watch the language. Again and again and again, I am seeing this phrase in the media, so-and-so died, or this number have died after testing positive for COVID-19. And those that test positive and die are then added to the numbers of people who've died from COVID-19. Note what they're not saying. Note the language. They died after testing positive for COVID-19. Not they died of COVID-19. Something else. This test does not in any way register how much of any virus the person has. And we have these things in legion in our bodies. And they never trouble us, except very rarely, because they never reach what they call viral load, the point where there's so much of it, it makes people sick. And so they're not testing for the virus, and they're not testing on how much of a, quote, virus that a person has to test if their problem is caused by it. And they are redesignating people dying to have COVID-19 when they didn't die from it. This is what's happening. And in Italy, the epicenter of it is an area called Lombardy. Lombardy has absolutely notorious toxic air. Some people call it the China of Europe. Again, China, Wuhan, toxic air, grotesque. So they have a lot of lung problems and they have a lot of deaths. The last figures I saw, in 1 year, in the area of Lombardy in Italy, 100,000 people, 99,000 and several hundred, died in a year of all causes. The next area of Italy, in second place, was 57,000. So they have all this capacity for people who are dying in large numbers in that area, and they're redesignating them. And even people who are part of the, if you like, establishment in Italy are saying that the designation of COVID-19 to deaths is vastly, vastly overrated. So this is what's going on. And you see, I've been tracking and exposing this global network that's behind this for all these decades, and saying what they want to do and how they want to change the world and how they want to restructure it as a global fascistic dictatorship. And what's happened in literally a matter of a small number of weeks has given them every box to tick. And if people think that's a coincidence, then they need live membership of Naivety Anonymous urgently.
So let's talk a little bit about those boxes to tick. It's very clear there's obviously a lot of uncertainties with regards to what they're discussing with COVID-19. I think that there's clearly some form of, whether it's just a very strong coronavirus or a very strong flu that's making people susceptible. That's my opinion. There's clearly a lot of, nobody seems to really have a clear answer with COVID-19. But
let me give you some information on that.
Okay. And then I want to talk about the boxes to tick and the larger macro and the economic ramifications.
There is a recurring theme, which has been well documented in books. And that is, every time there has been a global epidemic, pandemic of this type, going back to so-called Spanish flu in 1918 and Asian flu in the in the 50s and Hong Kong flu in the 60s. That epidemic has followed a major change in the electromagnetic pollution of the energetic field by a new level of technologically generated electromagnetic fields. They call it Spanish flu, killed vast numbers of people, way, way more than even they're talking about with this. And it's called Spanish flu. It's not to do with Spain. And it wasn't really flu when you looked at the symptoms. People were dying because their blood wouldn't coagulate. Don't sound like flu to me. And two things happened in the immediate run up to it. One, soldiers returning from the First World War were given large numbers of uncontrolled vaccines. Two, highly intense radar was introduced. Where did Spanish flu start? Madrid? No. On military bases in the United States, where this radar was going on and this vaccination had gone on. And then it started to appear in other places with the same common theme. And there's a guy who's investigated this, and he has written a book about it some years ago now, 2017, I think. And in 2018, he said something which is incredibly relevant now. He said, every time there has been a major change in the technological radiation pollution of the Earth, my words summarizing his statement, what has followed has been very significant effects on health. He said that in 2018. What's happened in the months preceding this outbreak? The introduction of 5G. What does 5G do? Its electromagnetic frequencies are enormously more powerful than anything we've faced before. Make cells toxic. So what do they produce? Well, they produce sickness, toxic cells, and they produce exosomes in response to it, which has been renamed COVID-19. And you know, in Britain, I did a video, it's on my website now, about the connection between 5G and this so-called virus. We have an organisation in Britain, it's a government agency, it's called Ofcom, Office of Communications, and it's basically the watchdog, bracket censor, of British broadcasting. They have said to British broadcasters, including the BBC, all of them, that they will impose sanctions and consequences if they allow any discussion on their stations of a possible connection between COVID-19 and 5G. So obviously there's a connection, because you're not going to do that otherwise. And what has been happening while this virus has been, hysteria has been underway, is they have been rolling out all over the world, not least in this country, while people have been locked down. They have been rolling out more and more and more 5G tower, 5G antennas down the street. And people have been seeing them. It's on social media. There's another 5G going up. In the same period, Elon Musk, who is a psychopath, by the way, who must know what he's doing, is putting up, he wants, eventually, it's going up all the time through this SpaceX front, 42,000 satellites beaming this stuff at the Earth. And about a week ago, he was given permission by the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. That's just a front for this cult and the telecommunications industry. That's why 5G's been rolled out without any testing whatsoever. He was given permission to put into place, install in America, 1 million ground-based antenna to interact and communicate with these 5G satellites. And what is happening, another 21 towns and cities have been open for 5G in Britain while this virus has been going. And the more they expand 5G, which is why they're trying to do it as fast as possible, the more people are going to get sick, and the more people are going to test for exosomes renamed COVID-19. This is what's going on. And because they control the numbers, because they're making them up, they can keep this rising for as long as they want, and they can stop it when they choose, simply by redesignating and counting the numbers in a different way and diagnosing in a different way. Which brings me just very briefly to this. If you notice something, we had a situation in China which was apparently catastrophic. They were building new hospitals, right, in a matter of a week or 2 weeks. Because what was happening is the rest of the world was being given something to be terrified of if it came their way, which was always the plan. In virtually no time, the lockdown's ending in China, flights are restarting, industries restarting. How on earth, these new hospitals are empty and closed? How can you go from that mass hysteria in China to boom, in no time? How can it happen? You stop diagnosing in the same way you did before, and you stop counting the numbers in the way you did before, thus the numbers disappear. It's about numbers. It's not about health. It's about numbers. It's about manipulating numbers, and it's about using this to destroy the independent income of billions to make them dependent on the state. And it's about justifying massive fascistic global Orwellian control of the global population. That's what this is about. Nothing to do with health.